She said my potato field was ruining her scenic view, so naturally she drove a $90,000 Sins SUV straight through it, because nothing says aesthetic like tire tracks and topsoil. Welcome to River Bend, where the HOA thinks my tractor needs HOA approval, and Karen thinks trespassing is a community outreach program. There's nothing quite like watching 18 months of therapy unravel in the time it takes a white Range Rover to rip through your potato rows like they're fairway turf. It even slowed down, just barreled across a southern field, tires flinging soil like shrapnel, as if my land was some kind of community golf cart path. I stood there, hose in one hand, coffee in the other, utterly dumbfounded. The SUV stopped 20 yards from me, the engine humming like it had every right to be there. The window rolled down, and there she was. Blonde, sunglasses the size of saucers, sipping something pink from a straw. She didn't look annoyed, she looked entitled. "Why, can I help you?" I asked, doing my best to stay calm. The woman blinked and smiled like I was a bellhop who'd forgotten her luggage. "I'm just taking the shortcut to River Bend. The main road's such a hassle, you know." She gestured toward the crushed crop behind her like it was a minor landscaping inconvenience. I told her this was private farmland and that driving through it wasn't just illegal, it was destroying my irrigation layout. Her eyes narrowed slightly, then she reached into her purse and pulled out a little leather badge. "Karen Rosenthal," she said, like it was supposed to mean something. "President of Riverbend Estates HOA. This field borders our walking trail. Technically, it's part of the shared aesthetic zone." I blinked. "Aesthetic zone?" She shrugged. "We keep your land prettier than you do." "My name's Ethan Callahan. I'm 44, just retired from the Army after 18 years, specializing in strategic base defense and perimeter analysis. I've served in sand, snow, and jungle, but nothing, absolutely nothing in my career prepared me for a woman who believed my family's farmland was her personal shortcut. 6 months ago, I moved back here to Westmont's outskirts to take over the land my grandfather left me. 50 acres of peaceful, quiet land until she drove straight through it like she was late for brunch. I didn't want trouble. I wanted potatoes, irrigation, and peace, but I knew that look, the kind that said, "Your fence means nothing to me." Later that day, I installed a simple post and a sign, "Private property, no vehicle access." The next morning, the sign was gone, just snapped off at the base like someone had tried to make a point. Tire tracks told the rest of the story. Same SUV, same route, except this time it veered slightly more east, closer to the creek that fed my crops. That wasn't ignorance, that was a message. I decided to document everything: drone footage, timestamps, soil impact. If she wanted to play this game, I'd be ready. I didn't survive 2 IED blasts just to get trampled by a suburban monarch in capri pants. By Friday, I'd confirmed from the land registrar that there was no easement, no historic right-of-ways, no community trail. The land was mine, legally and fully. But Karen wasn't interested in the law. She was interested in control. That afternoon, a letter appeared in my mailbox. HOA letterhead, notice of noncompliance, adjacent to Riverbend's scenic buffer zone. The obstruction? My tractor. Parked in my own field. I laughed out loud, then read the fine print. A $500 0 cents fine due in 10 business days. Welcome to River Bend, where even your dirt isn't yours if it ruins the view from someone's yoga room. 1 week. That's how long the new private property signs lasted before the retaliation came. This time, it wasn't a tire track or a missing post. It was a certified letter. Thick envelope. Riverbend Estates HOA logo embossed in gold, like it was a law firm or a royal decree. Inside, a formal notice of violation, section 4.6, visual intrusions and community sightline disruption. According to them, my signs, and get this, my barn roof, were diminishing the visual cohesion of the shared neighborhood horizon. I owed $4,000 0 cents in penalties and was instructed to consider community-friendly alternatives to fencing. I stared at the paper for a good minute before laughing so hard I nearly dropped it in the compost pile. I brought the notice to Sheriff Clint Myers, a soft-spoken guy with a handlebar mustache and a long memory for local feuds. He read the fine print, squinting like it might rearrange itself if he frowned hard enough. "They got no jurisdiction here," he muttered. "That HOA's always acting like they run the whole damn county." Still, he recommended documenting everything. and advised me to keep things legal. I agreed, but legal didn't mean passive. I ordered 6 more signs, all weatherproofed, and added a trail camera behind the cedar post. I wasn't going to let this go the polite way, not anymore. The twist came a few days later while I was picking up supplies from Jenkins Farm Supply down in Northfield. On the way out, a beat-up flatbed hauling construction debris took a sharp turn out of the parking lot. Something flew off the back, rolled across the road, and landed at my boots. Looked like a blueprint tube, dirty but sealed. I picked it up intending to toss it in the trash, but curiosity got the better. Back at the farmhouse, I unrolled it and froze. It was a survey map, titled in bold at the top, Riverbend Estates Phase 2 Expansion Plan. The proposed lots were neatly plotted, each with square footage and street names already assigned. But what sent ice through my spine was the boundary line, cutting directly through my east field, halfway to the creek. At the bottom of the page, next to the county seal, was a familiar name, Brent Rosendahl. Signature in blue ink, President Rosenthal Land and Build, LLC. I remembered seeing his face in a glossy HOA newsletter Karen once dropped at my gate, right next to a blurb about eco-conscious development that respects heritage. The man planning to pave my crops into cul-de-sacs had married the woman who drove through my land like it was valet parking. Suddenly, everything made sense. The shortcuts, the fake citations, the bogus fines. They weren't just messing with me. They were probing, testing how much I'd tolerate before they made a move. I stood at my kitchen counter, the blueprint spread beneath a bag of seed potatoes, and stared at the lines like they might blink first. This wasn't about aesthetics. This wasn't even about HOA overreach. This was about land, my land, passed down through 3 generations, and now a developer hiding behind a Range Rover and a neighborhood committee was trying to carve it up like Thanksgiving pie. I thought of my grandfather's voice, steady and calm. You don't need to swing first, boy, but you better be ready to swing back. I folded the map, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it Countermeasures. By the following Monday, the fencing had started to go up, simple T-posts and galvanized wire, nothing flashy, just a clear legal message. This land is not yours. I installed motion sensitivity lights and wired 2 trail cams to a solar battery setup. Old habits die hard, especially when you've spent 18 years designing perimeter defenses in hostile zones. I even mounted a thermal camera facing the eastern boundary, the same path Karen's Range Rover favored, like it was her morning coffee route. The fence wasn't just for security, it was a line in the dirt. And this time, I dared her to cross it. She didn't cross it, she escalated around it. 2 days later, I received another notice of noncompliance, this one citing unauthorized fortification inconsistent with community continuity standards. Translation, my legal fence made her fancy subdivision look less like a vineyard brochure. This time, the fine was $6,000, 0 cents, and attached was a glossy invitation to a Riverbend Open Forum for Neighborhood Harmony. The agenda? Discussions on visual pollution, agricultural overdevelopment, and unauthorized fencing near the Riverbend Scenic Buffer. I nearly choked on my iced tea. Agricultural overdevelopment on a farm. I didn't go to the meeting, but I watched it online, streamed live from the Riverbend Country Club ballroom. Karen stood at the podium in a pastel power suit, flanked by a slideshow of aerial photos from my farm, taken without consent. We must preserve the tranquil beauty of our community, she declared, while pointing to zoomed-in shots of my fence and an unflattering image of me in overalls, watering tomato seedlings. Applause followed from her HOA board. 3 people who looked like they'd never met a cow outside of Whole Foods. That night around 2:30 a.m., my motion light snapped on. The eastern fence line lit up like a prison yard, and I caught the silhouette of 2 figures ducking low near the creek. I threw on boots and grabbed a flashlight, but by the time I reached the edge, they were gone. The fence had been clipped in 3 spots, the solar panel was smashed, and one of the trail cams was gone, ripped clean off the post. Then I saw the spray. Across the lower rows of kale and carrots, streaks of grayish sludge. It smelled like sewer runoff. Later, I found tire tracks from a pressure washer truck, marked ironically with a decal that read, Riverbend Cleanscape Initiative. The truck had reverse-sprayed industrial wash water across nearly half an acre. It wasn't sabotage. It was a statement. I stood in that field for a long time, boots sunk in damp soil, hands clenched hard enough to hurt, and for the first time since all this started, I didn't just feel angry. I felt outgunned. This wasn't some HOA gone rogue. It was a campaign, a psychological operation in polite packaging. That morning, I made the call I'd been putting off. My younger sister, Madeline Callahan, answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but sharp. "Let me guess, Karen finally declared war?" she asked. I didn't say anything, just sent her the photo of the sludge-streaked crops and the $6,000 0 cents violation letter. 5 seconds later, she replied, "I'm booking a flight. Time to lawyer up, soldier." Madeline arrived at dawn in a black Subaru, coated in just enough desert dust to look like it belonged. Hair in a tight bun, boots on, legal pad out before she even hugged me. That's my sister. Part attorney, part heat-seeking missile. She walked the boundary line like a surveyor, snapping photos, asking questions, in that clipped courtroom tone she saved for opposing counsel and incompetent ex-boyfriends. By lunch, she'd already requested access to the county land records and flagged 3 potential issues in the HOA citations her term. Weaponized paperwork. Over grilled cheese and rain-soaked kale, she laid it out. "Your deed is airtight, they're bluffing, but if they've filed anything with the city claiming a right-of-ways, we'll find it." I nodded, already thinking 2 moves ahead. Bluffing was still hostile, and I'd spent my life turning hostile into history. The breakthrough came later that night. Madeline dug through online permit requests filed by Riverbend Estates and found a scanned document labeled Community Access Corridor Petition East Boundary. It had my parcel number on it. And a signature. My signature. Except I'd never signed it. She enlarged the scan, then cross-referenced it with an older permit I'd actually filed 3 years ago for a greenhouse. The handwriting didn't match. Neither did the ink. "Forgery," she muttered. "Clumsy, too. Probably filed by someone who thought no one would ever check." She sent it to her paralegal for a forensic review and smiled in that quiet, dangerous way only a pissed-off lawyer can. "They've been playing cute. Let's play back." With her legal end moving forward, I turned to the other kind of defense, one I was more fluent in. The next day, I got to work on what I called Operation Fence Hold. Not a wall, not traps, nothing illegal, just a series of non-lethal deterrent systems adapted from military-based defense strategies, only with a rural flair. First up, high-frequency directional speakers. I mounted them on fence posts near the main trespass zones. When triggered by motion sensors, they emitted an oscillating tone between 17 and 19 kilohertz. Harmless, but profoundly irritating. Think mosquito in your skull. Only Karen wouldn't be able to swat this one away. Next, UV reactive marking. I installed micro-spray nozzles facing outward rigged to license plate recognition. Any unauthorized vehicle would get a fine mist of transparent UV ink, completely invisible to the eye, but it'd light up like a rave poster under blacklight. Good luck explaining that to the HOA board. Then came the wheel traps. Nothing violent, just dense, uneven mesh nets woven from discarded agricultural fiber. When driven over, they tangled up in low-clearance undercarriages like gum on a shoe. Annoying, not dangerous. My favorite kind of consequence. And finally, the piece de resistance. The compost cannon. Technically, it was a repurposed irrigation nozzle loaded with slurry-grade organic fertilizer. Triggered by pressure sensors just inside the field line, it delivered a short, high-volume burst right at windshield height. Non-toxic, biodegradable, but profoundly fragrant. I tested it twice, once on a scarecrow, once on my own truck. Results, spectacular. I installed the signage that night. Plain white boards with big red letters, agricultural defense zone, entry triggers, activated systems, no threats, just facts. When I showed Madeline the setup, she raised an eyebrow, then laughed. "This is insane," she said, walking along the perimeter. "Insane, but legal." That was the line. I didn't want revenge, I wanted boundaries. And if the HOA couldn't read signs, they were about to hear sirens, see lights, and smell consequences. Let the deterrence begin. By Saturday morning, it was clear something ridiculous was coming. Crews rolled in from Riverbend Estates just past sunrise, setting up tents, banners, and folding chairs, mere feet from my eastern fence line. I watched through binoculars as they hoisted a glittery sign that read, "Riverbend Spring Festival, a celebration of community expansion." Community expansion. I sipped my coffee and muttered, so that's what they're calling a land grab now. Madeline, who'd driven in for the weekend, raised an eyebrow when I showed her the flyer someone had left in my mailbox. The tagline, Uniting Neighborhoods Through Shared Space. She laughed so hard, she spilled her tea. By noon, the field on their side was packed with SUVs, lawn games, and a suspicious number of real estate agents pretending to be neighbors. A food truck handed out mimosas. A drone hovered overhead. And right on cue, Karen emerged like a pageant queen, late for her spotlight. White sun hat, flowy white dress, platform wedges, ready to conquer. She took the mic and gestured toward my property, declaring, "Today marks a new chapter, a symbolic gesture of unity and openness as we reconnect with the land that sustains us all." The crowd clapped like trained seals. I noticed her Range Rover idling nearby, nose pointed straight at my southern plot. And then it happened. She handed off the mic, strutted to her SUV like a general preparing for victory, and hit go live on her phone. "Watch this, y'all," she cooed to her followers. "We're opening the historic Riverbend pathway." She gunned the engine and rolled straight through the fence opening I'd purposely left unsealed, the bait. The camera crew followed her from the sidelines, capturing every glorious second of her triumphant trespass, except her parade lasted all of 30 yards. First came the ultrasonic wail. My directional sound system kicked in the moment her front tires broke the beam. She flinched on camera but kept driving, laughing nervously. 5 more yards in, the UV spray misted the car, harmless, invisible, until the floodlights along the south row activated. Letters began to appear across the SUV's pristine hood. "Trespasser." Karen blinked, confused. Then the net triggered. Her front tires snagged, lurching the car forward like a drunken camel. Finally, the compost cannon went off with majestic timing, right through her open window. The Range Rover shuddered, and Karen screamed as a fine mist of aged cow waste soaked her white dress and matching interior. The live stream caught all of it, every second. I watched the chaos unfold from my porch, arms crossed. Madeline nearly fell over laughing. "You didn't," she wheezed. "You did." I just nodded. Across the fence, Karen was shrieking at her crew, flailing her arms and demanding someone get the sheriff, the National Guard, anyone. But it was too late. The internet had already claimed her. Within hours, her live stream had been clipped and shared on every platform imaginable. X, was trending. "Karen Crop Crasher," someone made a remix using her scream auto-tuned over banjo music. My favorite comment read, "White privilege meets brown justice." Sheriff Clint arrived around dusk. He walked the field, inspected the Range Rover, still stuck, and chuckled. "Looks like she hit a wall of karma," he said. I shrugged. "Just an agricultural defense zone, Sheriff." He tipped his hat. "Perfectly legal." Karen was still steaming when the tow truck finally yanked her SUV free, mud-streaked, manure-splattered, and glowing with shame. By Sunday morning, the HOA's PR machine had shifted into full spin mode. The viral mess that was Karen Crop Crasher had left a manure-splattered dent in Riverbend's sparkling image, and Karen was livid. Instead of owning up, she launched a press release calling the incident a malicious agricultural ambush, accusing me of deploying chemical weapons against an unarmed community leader. Yes, she actually used the phrase chemical weapons. According to Karen, the compost cannon was a form of bioterrorism, the UV ink was psychological warfare, and the netting vehicular entrapment. By afternoon, a small group of HOA loyalists stood at the edge of my property holding signs that read, "Farms are not fortresses," and "End the cow cannon." I wish I were joking. Madeline naturally was thrilled. "This is gold," she said, flipping through printouts of the press release. She just admitted to trespassing on the record and called your legally installed irrigation equipment a war crime. That's not defamation. That's confession with flair. I almost smiled. Almost. But the adrenaline was wearing off and something felt off. Too quiet, too strategic. Karen might have lost the battle, but this woman didn't know how to lose the war. That feeling hit home literally at 2:14 a.m. and the next night. I woke up to a distant pop, followed by a flickering orange glow outside my bedroom window. The old equipment barn, where I stored seeds, tools, and my grandfather's journals, was fully engulfed. I bolted outside barefoot, grabbed the fire extinguisher, and made it 10 steps before the heat sent me stumbling back. The flames licked the roof, then punched through it like it was paper, I called 911 with shaking hands, and within minutes, fire crews from Westmont were spraying down the perimeter to keep it from spreading to the main house. But the barn? Gone. Total loss. Ash and regret. The fire chief, a young guy named Dev, gave me the standard report. Possible electrical, maybe spontaneous combustion from hay. But I knew better. That barn had no power running to it, no chemicals, no flammable materials left out. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. When the smoke cleared, I walked through the wreckage in rubber boots, poking through scorched debris. That's when I saw it. Half buried, near the threshold, barely touched by flame. A cigarette butt, not just any cigarettes. Menthol Rose 100S. Obnoxiously floral, almost impossible to find outside boutique lounges, and I'd only ever seen one person smoke them in this entire county, Karen Rosenthal. I picked it up with gloved fingers, dropped it in a baggie, and labeled it. Evidence, unofficial, but damning. Sheriff Clint came by again that afternoon. He looked tired. I believe you, he said, examining the remains, but without a witness or footage, I can't arrest her. She'll say someone planted the cigarette. I nodded. I didn't expect justice from Clint. I expected stalling. Karen had allies in the county. The mayor played golf with her husband. The fire inspector's wife was on the Riverbend board. This wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. It was political, and it was personal. Madeline didn't waste time. She filed a formal complaint with the Westmont District Court citing harassment, vandalism, trespassing, defamation, and suspicion of arson with intent to coerce property surrender. The paperwork alone was thicker than a diner menu. She thinks this is some Stefford-level zoning dispute, Madeline muttered as she sealed the envelope. Let's introduce her to civil litigation, Callahan style. I watched her walk to the mailbox and drop it in, feeling something shift inside me. I'd built fences. I'd set up defenses. But this was the line. They hadn't just torched my barn. They'd lit a fire under me, too. The day after the barn fire, I was cleaning soot off what was left of my grandfather's cultivator when I heard a soft knock at the fence gate. Not the front driveway. No one came there anymore, but the side gate near the compost bins. A woman stood there, plain jeans, raincoat, ball cap pulled low. She looked nervous, like she was afraid to be seen. "Mr. Callahan," she asked. "My name's Tracy Monroe. I live on Juniper Loop, Riverbend side. Can we talk?" I almost waved her off. One more HOA rep trying to smooth things over, but something about her voice stopped me. It wasn't smug. It was tired. Tracy was a single mom, mid-30s, worked as a billing manager at the Westmont Dental Clinic, and she'd had just about enough of Karen Rosenthal. Over tea in my kitchen, she unzipped her oversized tote and slid over a folder, real thick, real organized. "I'm the HOA's assistant treasurer," she said. Or I was. I resigned last week, but before I left, I pulled every expenditure record from the last 4 years. I opened the folder, line after line of purchases, consulting services from companies with no websites, office furniture billed from designer stores in Dallas, event costs that looked suspiciously like someone's wedding, and then the numbers, a running tally of $210,000, 0 cents missing or misallocated. Funds pulled from homeowner dues. "She's been using the HOA like a personal bank," Tracy said flatly, "and every time someone asks questions, she finds them into silence." Madeline scanned the documents like a shark catching scent. "These are good," she murmured. "Dates, invoices, no dummy names. This could actually stick." I leaned back, stunned. Karen hadn't just tried to take my land, she was fleecing her own neighbors to do it. Tracy nodded. "She's planning a vote next week to grant the HOA emergency zoning authority, which would give them leverage to pressure the county about your land. But we're organizing a no-confident motion. We've got 23 signatures. We need 26 to trigger a board vote." I looked at her, then at Madeline. "What do you need from us?" Tracy smiled grimly. "Proof. And a platform." What followed was the fastest grassroots uprising Riverbend had ever seen. Madeline drafted an official complaint for the HOA Ethics Committee. Yes, even Karens have paperwork. And we leaked excerpts of the misappropriated funds online under the alias Riverbend Truth. Jessica, a younger resident with a background in social media marketing, built a simple website with screenshots, redacted invoices, and a live vote countdown. Residents began whispering, then texting, then outright organizing. Anonymous flyers appeared taped to mailboxes. Where did your dues go? On voting day, Karen showed up to the clubhouse in full battle regalia, pearls, clipboard, and a suspicious number of proxy ballots. She smiled like nothing was wrong, but she didn't know we were already streaming. Tracy had arranged for the vote to be live streamed on a private HOA Facebook group. Hundreds watched in real time as members cast ballots. When the proxies came in, suspiciously all pro-Karen. Madeline stepped in, requesting verification on ballot 43 through 68, she said, her voice cool and cutting. Some of these signatures belong to residents who've moved or passed away. A hush fell. A few residents gasped. One shouted, "My grandma's dead, Karen." And just like that, the room turned. The vote was paused. A quick recount on camera revealed 11 fraudulent ballots. Karen's control slipped through her fingers like overpriced lotion. With the fraudulent votes tossed, the motion passed 31-19. Karen Rosenthal was officially removed as HOA president. Her reaction? She stood up, pointed a manicured finger at the room, and screamed, "You're all ungrateful. I made this community." Then she stormed out, heel snapping on the tile like a punctuation mark. Madeline turned to me. We just pulled the plug on her little empire. "Tracy?" she cried, then hugged me like I'd just saved her from a burning house. Maybe in a way I had. By the time the county's financial crimes unit got involved, Karen had already swapped pearls for panic. A full audit of the HOA's books confirmed everything Tracy exposed and more. Falsified reimbursements, ghost invoices, and a $12,000 0 cents expense labeled emergency landscape retreat that turned out to be a spa weekend in Sedona. Karen claimed innocence, of course, blaming clerical miscommunication and rogue volunteers, but her lawyer looked about as convinced as a cat at a dog park. Then Brent, her husband, business partner, and co-conspirator, vanished. His development company's office was found emptied out overnight, the website offline, and the last anyone saw of him was boarding a flight to Aruba. Just like that, the Riverbend royal couple collapsed under the weight of their own HOA-funded empire. With Karen suspended and Brent missing, Riverbend Estates fell quiet for the first time in years. The board was dissolved, then restructured by court order. Tracy, after some convincing, agreed to step up as interim president. She refused the company car, which was just Karen's old BMW anyway, and instead requested a community garden budget. "We've spent enough years planting fear," she told the board. "Let's grow something useful." I saw her a week later, digging compost by hand with her son helping nearby. He was wearing a shirt that said, "No fines, just flowers." For the first time since this saga began, I felt something close to peace. The damage to my field from the sludge and fire was worse than expected. Whole rows of seed were lost, tools and irrigation lines melted or warped, but that's when the other farmers came through. Boxes of donated seed showed up from 3 counties over. Someone sent me an industrial tiller with a Post-it note that just said, "Keep plowing, we've got your back." It took 6 weeks and more coffee than medically recommended, but the field came back, one stubborn row at a time. I rebuilt the greenhouse, resowed the rows, and in early spring, sprouts broke through like green defiance. What didn't kill the land made it louder. That's when I decided to finish something my grandfather never had time to build, a proper front gate. Not fancy, just 2 sturdy wooden posts and a thick cedar beam across the top, but this time I added something extra. A metal plaque, laser cut and bolted in by hand. It read, "Legacy Soil, no HOA beyond this point." A line in the sand, a warning, a memory, and a promise. Madeline took a photo and sent it to every contact in her legal circles. "This," she said, "belongs in a textbook on boundary law and poetic justice." Tracy stopped by the day the gate was finished, holding a mason jar of homemade pickles and a clipboard. "Official HOA visit," she joked. "Your compost cannon is technically out of code, but we voted to keep it, just in case." She handed me a new certificate designating the farm as a protected historical property under the Riverbend Community Charter. No fines, no HOA control. Not ever again. I shook her hand as she laughed. "You're still not coming to the next bake sale, are you?" I smirked. "I'll send cookies." From behind the fence. That evening, I brewed a mug of strong black coffee and walked out to the edge of the field. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the soil. Just beside the old tire groove where Karen's Range Rover had once carved through like it owned the place, something was blooming. A cluster of sunflowers, tall and unbothered, had sprouted from the churned earth, golden heads bobbing gently in the breeze, growing exactly where the damage had been. I sat beside him on a folding chair, steam rising from my cup, and watched the light shift across the field. I almost lost, but didn't. Because sometimes to protect something that matters, you don't need to fight dirty. You just need to plant dirty and hold your ground. And yeah, I still keep the UV sprayers active, just in case she tries to come back. There's something deeply American about standing your ground, not with fists, but with facts, wit, and the stubbornness to outlast nonsense. Ethan didn't just protect a farm. He protected legacy, community, and the idea that your land, your labor, and your name mean something. Karen came with fake fines and HOA theatrics. Ethan replied with UV ink, compost cannons, and a lawyer in boots. And in the end, justice didn't knock. It rolled in on a Range Rover, got stuck, and went viral. So if you've ever dealt with a clipboard-wielding Karen or an HOA run like a royal court, drop a comment below. What's your story? Like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to B Stories, where fences hold, villains fold, and revenge grows in rows of sunflowers. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we defend them.